I'd like you to cast your mind back to high school. The sights and sounds of the building, the smell of the locker rooms, awkwardness of being a teenager. Now picture yourself in health class. Imagine the teacher at the front of the room. I wonder what your memory is of that time, of the content material that was taught, and how valuable those lessons learned really were. The reason I ask this is because one of the first connection activities I do with my high school students is ask them to interview their parents about their experience of health class. And I've come to the conclusion, based on their responses, that if you're my age, give or take 15 years, your high school health experience wasn't a high school highlight. And so on behalf of my predecessors, I apologize. I apologize if your high school health teacher was anything like Coach Carr from Mean Girls, who in a typical portrayal of health teachers on the big screen famously said, "Don't have sex, or you will get pregnant and die." I apologize if your health teacher was a gym teacher or a coach first, who spent their time wasting away the day thinking about X's and O's when they should have been teaching you about X's and Y's. Typically, health class hasn't always been taught by a teacher with a health endorsement, but thankfully today's best practice recommends that we have fully trained and qualified teachers teaching health at all levels. I apologize if, like Coach Carr, your teacher tried to teach by using fear, sharing scary stories, showing the most gruesome photographs of sexually transmitted infections, or seeking to shock you with the infamous "This is your brain on drugs" public service announcement. I'm sorry if you were warned of all of the evils of certain behaviors. Sex is bad. These foods are bad. Drugs are bad. But then you were told that all you needed to counter these evils was to just say no. Teaching through fear does not work. And in fact, it conditions students to associate fear with behaviors that they'll take into adult life. And scare tactics don't work because they often show extremes that won't be experienced by most people. Think of sexually transmitted infections and the fact that the most common and perhaps scariest symptom is that of no symptoms at all. Teaching through fear might work with those individuals who are equipped with the skills to make behavior change, but what use is a Just Say No campaign without teaching students how to say no effectively? I apologize if at any time during your health experience you were shamed because of the way you live your life, or your expressions of love and the relationships that you sought out weren't represented in the one sex ed class that probably separated boys and girls and taught them in separate locations. And no, there's no time for questions. And even if you did have a question, health class wasn't the safest space in which to ask that question. And so on behalf of my predecessors, those teachers and coaches that have come before me, I apologize if your health class experience left you with more questions than answers and failed to equip you with the knowledge and skills that you needed to live the healthy and happy life that lay before you. And so if you think you know health class, I'm here to tell you that things have changed for the better since you and I were in the health classroom. And those changes can best be summed up by this quote from a student of mine from about 10 years ago, when they said of health class, it's not just about getting an A in class, it's about getting an A in life. We've moved away from memorization and recall of facts, and we now teach students valuable health skills that they need to live a healthy life. We give them the opportunity to practice those skills, and we empower them to use those skills to improve not only their health, but the health of their friends, their family, and their community. We've moved away from playing the short game, hoping for a successful semester, and we now play the long game, aiming for a successful lifetime. Health behavior theory tells us that knowledge alone does not change behavior. And so we've moved away from that old-fashioned belief that knowledge is power. And we now tell students that skills are power. Don't get me wrong, teachers are still teaching content, but that content is now woven in between the teaching of health skills. And that content is shaped by the specific needs of the student population. And that information comes from the results of local youth risk behavior survey data. Although it's fair to say that teenagers are teenagers, there will be specific health behaviors of concern in each high school based on their unique location. Informed by data, I know that binge drinking is an area of concern at my school. And so we weave that content into our curriculum, in addition to providing supports for students and families in need. Today's health class identifies the functional knowledge that students need to know in order to develop and apply their health skills. Students don't need to know the 206 bones of the body, but they do need to know how to find a reliable orthopedist if they were to injure one of those bones. And so if you were in my health class today, there are 7 health skills that we would address. With more information in their pockets than ever before on one of these, it's important that my teenagers know how to search and use the internet effectively. And so we'll teach the skill of accessing valid and reliable sources of information. And then I'll allow students to practice that skill by doing research projects based on health questions that they have. We can apply the skill of analyzing influences to nutrition. And we can look at those influences, both positive and negative, internal and external, to perhaps shape and explain our relationships with food. Communication skills are so important in the life of a teenager, and we can practice those skills safely in the classroom using participatory methods such as role play. This allows my students the opportunity to practice their conflict resolution, their negotiation, their refusal skills. And by practicing those regularly in the classroom, it means that my students are more likely to be successful when they go out into the real world. In my drugs and alcohol unit, we might look at the skill of decision making, factoring in personal values before making an informed decision. And then we'll reflect upon that decision to see whether that will be the choice that we would make again in the future. This, in turn, might lead to lessons on goal setting, a very important skill. I will teach my students the value of setting SMART goals, goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. And together we'll set short and long-term goals that my students will strive to be successful. With the skill of self-management, I'm looking for evidence of my students practicing health-enhancing behaviors. And as they become more proficient in this skill, we see an increase in self-efficacy. My students feel like they have the confidence to take control of their health and help others do the same also. Which leads to my final and favorite skill, that of advocacy. If I've learned anything in my 24 years in the classroom, it's that if you encourage a student to speak up and speak out on behalf of a cause of which they're passionate, boy, do they use their voice. We can take the skill of advocacy and apply it to any area of health that resonates with our students. When you've had a young man advocate for binge drinking awareness because his father's battling alcohol dependency, you know that he'll pour his heart and soul into that assignment. And when you've had a transgender girl write to the school board and advocate for LGBTQ concerns, and the school listens and takes action, you know that that young lady is going to go on and use her advocacy voice for the rest of her life. Today's 21st century health class is creating a generation of young adults who are practicing health-enhancing behaviors and feel empowered to help others do the same. These students are confident in their ability to take control of their life and make change in this world. And so here's where you come in. I need you to see life through the lens of a health-literate teenager and ask yourself, what role can they play in improving the health of our community? Listen as they communicate their wishes for a healthier future, as they seek to answer the questions that face society today. Provide them with a seat at the table. Bless you. Provide them with a seat at the table and involve them in decision-making about the provision of local services. Question them and listen to their answers. Check out their opinions and ideas as they share their passion for helping others improve their health. Get to know these young advocates. Share your story as you mentor them and develop them. Help amplify their voice and invite them to stand alongside you, and together you can advocate for causes of which you are most passionate. Today's health class will continue to nurture and develop this generation of young advocates. I ask you to harness their energy, embrace them for their passion, their vision, and their drive, and together we can work towards a healthier and happier community. Thank you.